Here are some key questions to discuss. What would be some professional ways to challenge court authority, like the judge? Are there times when an interpreter doesn't have to interpret everything? What role does the interpreter play when a client's rights might be violated? What are the repercussions if the interpreter does not obey the judge, if they don't stop what they're saying with the client? Is that right? Is that wrong?
Well, I suppose ultimately there's always a possibility of being cited for contempt of court. Certainly isn't any precedent or any law that can tell you exactly what you're liable or likely to face. But I think it's important to remember that judges have bosses too, and that they're expected to do their job properly. And so I think being cited for contempt would be a pretty extreme outcome. I imagine it's possible a judge might ask the interpreter back into chambers if from his perspective, the interpreter was delaying or interfering with proceedings. He could also simply dismiss the interpreter and ask that another be retained to finish that trial. Although given that trial time, court time is so precious and at such a premium these days, I think it's unlikely that that would happen.
If we were to see that scene again and do it a little bit differently, Shannon, what would you have done in that interpreter's place?
I would have controlled the situation more quickly, but ultimately, if the judge is going to stop me from interrupting, as he put it, it's going to happen sooner or later.
But how would you have controlled the situation?
When the interpreter is at the side and the Crown and defence are talking or addressing the court, you are supposed to be interpreting simultaneously. The problem is when two people start speaking at the same time, and this happens a lot. Often it's the tail end of one, and you can just speak fast and just keep going if you're fast enough. But as soon as your ability is threatened, then you do have to say something. I would, at that point, say something. Your Honour, the interpreter requests that the speakers slow down. The interpreter has not interpreted what Crown said. The interpreter has got as far as, and then just say the last thing that you remember, and request repetition from that point on. The judge in this scenario was at fault because he is the boss of the court. He was supposed to help the interpreter do her job. The interpreter's mandate is to interpret everything for the benefit of the accused, and that did not happen. That was the way the script was written. This happens in court, and if, well, I've told you what I would do. Once the judge speaks like that, it's on the record, and it's the judge's problem, not yours, come appeal time.
It must be tremendously challenging to have two people saying things at once. Marcus, have you been in that situation where you've got either two lawyers or you've got the person you're interpreting for, there's things coming at you from all directions? How do you stay cool? How do you do this?
How do you stay cool? I think it's something you have to have. It happens a lot that both lawyers start arguing a particular point or a particular thing that was said. But I haven't been in an unfortunate situation like the one we just saw. Normally with the judges that I've worked for, or the courts that I've worked for, the judge took control of the situation quite quickly. You have to maintain your cool, and simultaneous is the most difficult aspect of interpreting, so it will take several years until you feel reasonably comfortable in any situation to interpret. And I think this is again the question of educating the legal community as to the role of the interpreter, and also what's important is to establish the interpreter as a professional and to gain the respect of judges and lawyers and Crown as a professional, because I think a lot of the problems hinge on that they don't respect the interpreter as what he or she actually is at that moment. They put them on a different level, but the interpreters are there to ensure that court proceedings go ahead properly.
Yolanda, have you ever found yourself in a situation like that?
In cases where I see that there's nothing happening, nothing is coming from the judge, I usually interject. And I say, Your Honor, the interpreter cannot interpret to two people speaking at the same time. That usually is a good cue for the judge to say yes, you know. And then they think that the mics are also taping the conversation, whatever they're saying, and it has to go into a transcript, so it would be very difficult for the transcript to come out clear. The other thing that people tend to forget is that having everything interpreted for you is not just something that we like to do, it's a charter right. Because every accused who is before the court has a charter right to understand everything that is being said at trial. And if he doesn't understand everything, then he's not present at his own trial. So it is something that is very important.